Greetings ladies and gents, and welcome to this match video for Mud's mission taken from the website Royal Road. As always, I hope that you all enjoy this episode, and if you do, please consider supporting the channel. Also, all of these episodes will be available as a podcast on the various different podcast platforms. All the links will be down below. Chapter 5, Maleficent. As it deposited the nude and inert thin human safely outside the mansion, Mud considered the previous combat. While the first two ambushes had been incredibly successful, that might have been less to do with Mud's own skills than it had initially thought. After all, the ambush failed completely against the scarred human despite a perfect setup. The only explanation was that Mud was not the skilled ambusher, and the first two targets were simply incredibly incompetent. If all three of the intruders had been as skilled and cautious as the scarred human, Mud would have been easily defeated, and all the master's valuables plundered. Another unwanted discovery during the fight had been an extreme pain it experienced when its arm had been sliced off. Now that it calmed down and assessed the situation, Mud now understood the source of the agony. "Avoid being damaged and seek repair if you're injured." Those were the orders of the master. The pain was Mud's neural response to failing to follow an order, and the panic desperation of reabsorbing the remains of its arm was an instinctual need to fix itself. Thinking back, Mud had felt a similar mental anguish when a thick human had eaten a cracker, although to a much less extreme. Perhaps the difference was the relative proportion of failure, or some other factor. Unfortunately, experimentation was impossible, since it could not intentionally defy orders to experience the pain again. Mud closed and locked the front door, and turned its focus from the past to the future. There were countless tasks that needed to be done as quickly as possible. Mud needed to improve its combat abilities so it could not be defeated by thieves, finish cleaning and organize the house, and complete a full inventory of all the master's possessions. Since Mud had no idea how to get better at fighting, it decided to continue cleaning and organize as it had been doing before the humans had interrupted it. It was even possible if it would find something that would make it stronger. Bursting with motivation, Mud slithered towards the basement. At the bottom of the set of worn-down steps, a set of massive iron doors held closed to the thick metal slide lock. After rolling down the stairs, Mud disengaged the lock and pushed open the heavy door. The stone room was large, fully twice the size of the other room in the mansion, and equally deep. Along the walls lay desks cluttered with typical Salthar fashion, with manuscripts and strange tools. Despite the assortment of curious devices on display's attention was naturally drawn to the center of the room. A lone figure hung suspended in the air, seemingly sitting cross-legged on an invisible chair. Surrounding the figure lay a complex array of shapes and symbols arranged in a circle. Each line glowed with shifting colors, casting pale light on the bored-looking resident. The figure somewhat resembled a human or an elven woman in the late teens or early adulthood, aside from the notable divergences. For one, a set of massive rounded wings grew out from her back. They resembled the howlmouth's wings Mud had found in one of the piles of the second floor. Each wing had patterned with several instances of curved, five-pointed shape, resembling a spearhead. From the lower back a tail emerged, tipped with the same five-pointed shape. Although it was hard to be sure in the shifting light, the tail, wings, and thick fluffy hair emerging from the creature's head all held a deep maroon tint. Was this a thing? Best match? Demon. Are you just going to stare, or do you have something to say? How rude. Mud considered what to do for a moment. Invaders needed to be disabled and removed from the house, but judging from the door locked from the outside, this, demon was likely already here when the master had died. It might even be a possession. Communication would be ideal, but unfortunately Mud hadn't worked out how to speak. Having finished its examination of the room, Mud got back to work cleaning it. "What? You're just going to ignore me? A beautiful maiden is being held prisoner here." After thinking for a moment, the demon smiled wickedly. "That bastard, nice enchanter made you clean up this place, didn't he? You should clean up this junk he spilled all over the floor around me." With Mud simply continuing sorting a pile of junk in the corner, The demon scowled for a moment, and then smiled brightly and continued, "Actually, that reminds me, your creator told me to pass a message to you when I see you. The message was, I order you to wipe away the magic writing on the floor of this room as soon as possible." Those were his exact words, yep. Mud paused in his task and moved towards the magic writing. If the master had ordered it, then it would be done. Just as Mud reached for the nearest marking, it remembered a certain skill that it examined when it was reading the skill point list. Skill Deceiver improves ability to deceive by making untrue statements. It was possible to say something that wasn't true and trick something into doing what you wanted them to do. Considering the circumstances, it was extremely unlikely the master had left an order like that. Mud nearly fell for this deception, but the question remained, why had this demon tried to trick it? Was it an enemy? Isn't it obvious? I want to get out of this stupid binding. And no, I'm not an enemy. In fact, I'm your friend, so we should help each other out. That reply was oddly specific, almost as though the demon knew what Mud was thinking. It's not that hard to grasp the surface thoughts of so single-minded and simple as you. Look, that's not important. How about we make a deal? Surely there are things you want. If you let me out, I'll help you with your problems. That's a good deal, right? The demon smiled seductively. You've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. Mud pondered. Already the demon had lied to it. Any further dealings with the creature would be suspect. Since it was impossible to trust the demon, it was better just to ignore it and leave it imprisoned here for eternity. As long as Mud didn't free it, there was probably no way for it to escape. Wait, eternity? Why do you seem so sure that I couldn't get Sulthar to let me out? Don't tell me. He died, didn't he? Oh, blast it. I could have corrupted him if I had just had a bit more time. Well, probably not. That guy was a freak. But if he's dead and his pet golem is planning on hiding me away, eternity might actually be... The demon's face paled and a look of dread crossed her face. Turning towards Mud, the demon flew towards the edge of the circle and slammed her palms against the invisible wall. Listen, I understand you can't trust me, but there's a way you can make sure I'm telling the truth. That way, we can make a deal and you can let me out of here. Mud continued cleaning and sorting the tools. In the pile over there is a book on demon summoning, abyssal evocation. If you can't trust me, you should at least be able to trust your creator's books, right? Getting no reply, the demon soldiered on. If you know my true name, I won't be able to lie to you, and we can make a fair trade. My name is... The demon winced and then continued with a softer voice. Jabraxicalikamli Walkley Dupulius. Mud continued cleaning the room. Sometime later, when it finished, Mud used some of its master's paper and quills and wrote out a complete inventory from memory. Neither the paper nor the ink were destroyed by being used, so it was fine. Besides, using an object for its intended purpose wasn't something that called for defending. Still, Mud wouldn't be using any of the master's belongings that were destroyed with use if it could help it. Satisfied with the job completed, Mud pulled out a certain book and started reading. In the shifting light, a demon smiled. End of chapter. Chapter 6. Making a Deal. When selecting a magically bound servant, it is important to first determine the roles which they'll need to fulfill. No single option is perfect for all situations, as each style of servant has distinct advantages and disadvantages. As an example, a tamed beast is cheap and effective at putting a cart or plowing fields. That same beast could be much less useful, however, if you needed to file paperwork to balance your budget. For the majority of applications, the most affordable and safe choice is either a tamed beast or, if it's legal in your nation, slaves. In case of repetitive tasks over a long period of time, more permanent solutions such as golems or, again, depending on local laws, the undead may prove to be more profitable. Be warned, however, that it often takes considerable time for the profits from a golem or an undead's longevity and tirelessness to make up for the steep initial costs of production. Demons are sometimes said to be the most universally capable of magical servants. While that is true in terms of unusefulness alone, the large initial price of summoning and the high risk of subversion make them much less popular in practice. In general, demons should be considered an absolute last resort and avoided at all possible costs. Excerpt from Solving Problems Within Human Resources. 3 rough-looking youths sit around a small table outside a quaint coffee shop on a beautiful sunny day. "So, mind filling us in on what the hell happened back there?" asked a bleary-looking Bark, rubbing his temples. "One moment I'm collecting swag, and the next I'm cold, naked, and with a pounding headache." Cobb chuckled as he thought back to the sight of Bark and Jericho hiding behind trees and shuffling through the back alleys as they returned to town. They had been unwilling to wait in the woods as Cobb went to fetch some clothes for them since, in their compromised state, even the weakest monsters would be a fatal threat to them. By some miracle, they had managed to reach Jericho's house without being spotted. Their panic had been infinitely amusing to Cobb. So fixated had they been on immediate situation that they had yet to discuss the cause of their misfortune. "You got beat up and mugged is what happened," said Cobb with a wide grin. "I know that. What I'm asking is who did it, and why are you the only one that didn't get ripped off?" The pounding headache was making his friend, Cobb, seem even more unbearable than usual. At that moment, a cute demi-human waiter approached the table carrying a delicious-looking chocolate cake and a cup of coffee. She gravely set them on the table. "Here's your order, sir." Cobb nodded his thanks and took a sip of his coffee. The food here was excellent, but it was the staff that kept him coming back. Those fluffy rabbit ears just set his heart at ease. "How about ordering me something? We're pals, aren't we?" asked the drooding Jericho as he stared fixedly at the cake. "Buy your own," replied Cobb as he shoveled an unnecessarily large bite into his mouth, smiling smugly. He added, "Oh, that's right, you can't, can you? Because you got robbed when you tried to rob somebody." Specks of cake flew from his mouth as he laughed at his friend's misfortune. "All right, fine. You're great and we're terrible. Very funny. Now mind telling us what happened." Cobb washed down his cake with a sip of coffee and decided to relent. "As far as I can tell, you were both ambushed by some monster, probably a servant of Sithla. It attacked by clinging to the roof and dropping down on your head like a slime. As for what it was exactly, I'm not certain. It looked like it was made of mud or clay, probably a bound earth elemental, or maybe a slime that mutated with earth affinity." Cobb took another bite of his cake and then continued. "Whatever it was tough. Nearly split it in half with my first attack, and it reformed like it didn't even feel it. I cut off its arm after that, and it activated some berserk skill and injured my leg, and then put its arm back on. At that point, I decided that it was hopeless, so I heroically carried you both outside to save your lives." "Somehow that doesn't seem like something you would do." "Well, we got away with our lives and we weren't turned over to the gods, so I'm thankful for that at least. Why did the monster take our clothes and not kill us, though?" Cobb took a sip of the coffee and contemplated. "That I don't know. Normally, if I encountered a weird monster, I would ask for advice from an experienced delver, but it would be a bit awkward explaining where I saw it. You two can do what you want, but I'm giving up on that place. We might be able to kill that monster if we all worked together. But who knows what else is in that house? There could be dozens of those things in there for all we know. I prefer to play it safe and grind in the dungeon for a while." Bark looked at Cobb with disgust. "This is why you'll never get anywhere in life. You have the talent, but no ambition. You give up too easily. All we need to do is take one little dirt slime, and we have all the riches of a high-level enchanter. Don't come begging to us for handouts when we strike it rich without you. Isn't that right, Jericho?" "I'm hungry." Mud set aside a book on demonology and began writing on a piece of paper. Splitting its focus, Mud tried to think in the direction of the demon. "Braxacalicomic walkly duplius, I have a question for you." The demon stirred and looked at Mud. "Please don't use my true name so casually. Even if we were just thinking it, it could cause problems if anyone with psionics were nearby. Just refer to me as Jabrax. It's casual conversation." "Jabrax, why do humans cover themselves with fine plant fibers?" Surprise crossed her face. "That's your question. That's Definitely not what I expected. But I'll answer you. Humans are really ashamed of their disgusting bodies, so they cover themselves up, especially their naughty bits. They usually cover themselves up with things that are soft and comfortable, since their frail bodies can be damaged and wear something too rigid. Clothes also help protect them from the environmental hazards, like low temperatures and strong sunlight. Basically, humans are pathetic and weak. If humans wear clothes because they're pathetic and weak, why are you wearing clothes? Are you pathetic and weak too? Of course not! Demons aren't like humans, and since we're perfect, we have no need for shame. Anyway, when I was summoned, my body was pulled from the abyss without the tools or accessories. A summoner would have been plenty stupid to let a demon come with any equipment. Sithlar gave me these clothes after he called me because he said it was, distracting. I kept them because I think they look nice. They really suit me, don't you think? Jibrax did a little twirl to show off a tank top and shorts. Why did the master summon you? What purpose do you serve? Oh, you're asking why a lonely old man living alone would summon a demon who looks like a cute girl, she asked, taking an alluring pose. Yes. You're no fun. Fine. He was just keeping me here to harvest parts from me for his alchemy. He wasn't even interested in making a deal. Whenever I tried to seduce him, he would just paralyze me. It was really annoying, come to think of it. Him dying was probably a lucky break for me, since I got to meet you. How can I most quickly improve my combat abilities? Jibrax put a finger on her chin and took a thoughtful demeanor. The fastest way is for someone as weak as you to get stronger is to gain experience and level up, or get better equipment. You probably couldn't wear normal armor, but a weapon should improve your killing power. As for leveling, just kill weak monsters, like the kind you find in low-ranked surface wilderness. You should be able to take out low-level creatures if you sneak up on them, although it would be a bit risky. If you let me out, I could help power level you fighting stronger monsters. I'm pretty good at a fight. Jibrax flexed her thin arms to accentuate the last point. Mud lifted a thick stack of papers it had written on during the conversation and slithered over the ruins which it now knew to be a magic circle of binding. Careful not to disturb the markings, Mud stuck the stack of papers past the boundary. Take these. What is this? Jibrax asked and snatched the documents. This is your contract. All of this? The print is tiny. How many pages is this? 35. I know the book says that you should be careful when making contracts with demons, but this is, I've never seen anything like this. Who actually uses the word Hierithro? And what's with this massive list of objects in the middle? You know what? Never mind. Just give me some time to read this. Bud was fine with that. After all, the conversation with the demon had given it another goal for the moment. It was time to go hunting. End of chapter. Chapter 7. Mousetrap. Wriggling out of the Sulthar's mansion for the first time since it was born, Mud carefully examined its surroundings. The area around the isolated manor was a tangle of overgrown grass and weeds. Beyond the grass, countless coniferous trees grew tall and proud, blocking sight deeper into the forest. The ground between the trees was thick, and the ferns and ivy, which crawled precariously up the thick trunks. Playful bird songs and buzzing insects reverberated over the gentle humming of the evening breeze. Confident that there was no immediate threats, Mud closed the locked door, burying the spare key deep inside his body. Following the wall of the building, Mud made its way towards the hunting ground that it had spotted from the second-floor window. Wanting to assess itself for battle, Mud opened up its status. Name: Mud Golem. Level 1 Mud Golem. Class: None. HP 5 out of 5. SP 0. MP 100. Spells: Skills 0. Housework 7. Mathematics 1. Sneak Attack 1. Stealth 2. Unarmed Combat 1. Amorphous Form Rare. Dictionary Unique. Status: Effects Incomplete. Articulation Ruins. Thankfully, Mud's HP had recovered over the course of an hour after the fight with the scarred human. When Golem had initially reabsorbed the remnants of its arm, the dirt had almost felt foreign to it. Over the course of the healing, the material seemed to reintegrate itself with the rest of its body. to the point that Mud couldn't even tell them apart anymore. Stealth had improved by 1 point when it was successfully hid from the scarred human in the hallway. Housework had appeared to improve rapidly as the house was cleaned. Sneak attack and unarmed combat had been gained when Mud had ambushed the thick human. The former when it fell on him, and the latter when it had resorted to bludgeoning him with his arms. Thinking back, the inquisitive automaton noticed a certain pattern to the skills which it had acquired without a skill point so far. Each skill was listed as common by the dictionary, and each one was a skill that automatically granted related knowledge when appropriate. Whether such skills were easier to learn or it was coincidence would require more information. Putting those thoughts aside, Mud arrived at his destination. Behind the manor was a heap of refuse. Either due to laziness or lack of care, Suthlar seemed to dispose of his trash by simply throwing them out the back window. This suited Mud just fine, since the decomposing mass attracted a wide variety of hunting targets. The golem set its sight on its first target, a plump rat nibbling on a dry bread crust. Wasting no time, Mud charged forward and fell upon the unfortunate mouse like a landslide. Or it would have, had the rat not swiftly fled the moment it was approached. After a series of events repeated itself 3 times, Mud was forced to admit that this tactic was not working. The problem was movement speed. Slithering around by manipulating the shape of its torso was considerably slow. Other methods of movement, such as rolling or crawling on the tentacle-like limbs, had been even slower. At best, Mud could only move as fast as a walking human. Hunting with a frontal assault was completely impossible. Giving up on this method, Mud decided to try following the advice that unscrupulous demon and attempted an ambush. Following the vague insight from the stealth skill, Mud located an area that seemed to attract a large number of rats, flattened as much as possible, and stayed perfectly still, and waited. A nervous rat carefully approached the inviting piece of cardboard, glazed with the slightest remnants of a mouth-watering cheese. Just moments ago, the rat had been chased off by a huge, but luckily slow-moving monster. Now the monster was nowhere to be seen. Its experienced scavenger didn't let its guard down, though. The monster could still be in the area. Vigilant was at a maximum, and the rodent approached a meal, ears listening to the slightest disturbance. As the rat lifted her head to take the first bite, pillars of dirt suddenly sprang from the ground in all directions. She responded immediately and attempted to leap the bars, but it was too late. The pillars had already met above her before she could even reach the top. Unable to chew through the stone-like prison, the rat was now crushed. Experience gained 1. Success! The experience that would make Mud stronger was harvested. The golem didn't feel any different, but Dictionary had backed up what Jabrax had said. Experience would make it stronger. Perhaps there was some unknown way to use the resource, or it was only useful when a large amount was collected. Regardless, a way to acquire experience had been discovered, and it would surely come in handy in the future. Returning to its ambush position, Mud settled in for a long night of hunting. The next day, Mud entered the basement and slid towards the magic circle. Lifting itself high with pride, Mud waved towards the imprisoned demon to get her attention. "I have acquired experience." Setting aside the document she was rereading for the 3rd time, Jabrax looked up. "That's great. How much did you get?" "I have acquired 5 experience." 5 experience in an entire day. Dropping her head in both palms, she let out a deep sigh. "That's, not a good speed. Even if you're level 1, you look like at least a rank 1 monster with a shape-changing ability of yours. What were you even hunting?" "Rats! I killed 5. I also killed some insects, but I didn't get any experience from those." "You're hunting rats. No wonder your gains are so pathetic. If you just let me out of here, I could... forget it. I'm almost done reading this thing anyway, and it doesn't seem like a bad deal. I doubt I could convince you to let me out without some half-baked promises either." "That is correct." "Right. Look, you need to hunt something stronger, something higher up the food chain. Rats might be fine for a novice human learning the ropes, but for a construct like you, they're just too easy. Killing a magical beast would be best, but a mundane animal would be fine if it was at least a predator. Wouldn't that be more dangerous? Laying down in the air as if on an invisible bed, she replied, Yes, but that's the kind of the point. The more dangerous something is, the more experience it gives, generally. Rats aren't a threat to anyone, so they only give one experience. You need to hunt more dangerous things, or you could take too long to get strong. Jabrock sat up and looked squarely at Mud. Think of it this way. What's going to happen if somebody attacks the place sooner rather than later? You need to get strong as soon as possible. Maybe you could level up eventually just by killing rats with your immortal lifespan, but it won't do much good if somebody kicks down the door within a month or a week. It's already happened, hasn't it? I heard sounds of a scuffle through the floorboards right before we met. With a frown, she added, If it happened once, it can happen again. Mud was hesitant to accept the advice of the deceptive Abyssal, but it couldn't argue with the logic. It was possible that those humans would come back at any moment, or others like them. Mud was naturally opposed to the risk when it came to its body. Avoid being damaged. The words of the master etched in its very soul. But if it didn't get stronger now, wouldn't the danger of being damaged later be even greater? If both options went against the master's orders, Mud could only choose the lesser of two evils. Mud firmed its resolve. It would hunt something dangerous today, and secure the experience needed for the future. End of chapter. Chapter 8. Meeting Room. Nearly all magical contracts function under the same general principle. A list of actions is enumerated which his contractor becomes unable to perform willingly. While this is an incredibly useful and flexible tool for a variety of situations, there are some inherent deficiencies in this method. One obvious flaw is that actions can only be prevented and not forced. The interpretive flexibility of magic allows a contract maker to give orders which may seem to be causing action, but in truth, the contract functions in those cases by making the inverse of that order bad action. As an example, if a contractor orders a constructor to make it a cup of tea, the magic would activate by punishing or preventing any action by the contracted which will not result in making a cup of tea. In most situations, this is merely a technical difference of importance only to scholars, but practically, in the case of an intelligent contracted, it is important to keep such minutiae in mind. Demons and intelligent slaves are surprisingly adept at abusing the differences between the contractor's orders and the actual enforcement. Another limitation to keep in mind when utilizing contracts is that spell work almost always determines if an order is being followed or not from the perspective of the contracted. One example is the incredibly common order to not tell lies. Even with such an order in effect, contractor can still tell falsehoods simply due to ignorance, or, if they are particularly clever, they may say things which are technically true but are misleading. Imagine you ask your contracted demon if there are any monsters around the corner, and they'll tell you, yes, there is a goblin. You turn the corner and find that, yes, there indeed is a goblin, right next to an angry fire dragon. Excerpt from Understanding Contract Magic. 3 middle-aged men and 2 women sit in comfortable chairs around a wide desk of polished mahogany. Setting down a document, a massive man with thick handlebar moustaches coughs slightly. Well, that's all we have to report for the month. Overall, a pretty average harvest from the dungeon. A mousy and overweight man with the deep bags under his eyes dabbed the sweat from his forehead. Thanks, Ghoul. Keep up the good work. It's reassuring to have such a steady income for the city with you running the association. Reaching up for his cup of water, the mayor of Galtheus took several deep gulps. Looking concerned, the bookish older woman with the grey bun spoke up. You don't look so good, Guy. You're overworking yourself. You ought to take a break and get some rest. Smiling sweetly, the kindly old lady, who could run the school since she was a child himself, he replied, Thank you, Mrs. Bloodhammer, but I just can't. If I took a break now, it would be even worse when I got back. Anyway, things will calm down after the festival." A shapely woman in a shimmering purple robe, the captain of the city guard, leaned forward. "If you can't take a break, you should at least stop by Sulthar's place to see if it can whip up a tonic or something. I don't think you would ignore the request from the mayor if there's something simple like that. Actually, that reminds me." Lifting himself up from his slumped posture, the corpulent and energetic merchant sat straight. "Sulthar didn't pick up his groceries this week. That's pretty unusual for him. Cool, did he get called away on a special assignment?" The association master leaned back and crossed his two muscular arms. "Not that I know of, and he's retired, so if he got called in for something, I would have definitely heard of it." "Maybe he's dead," said the guard captain, followed by a giggle. Mrs. Bloodhammer turned to her aghast. "You shouldn't joke about such things in regard to people our age. Sulthar might be a genius, but he's still a mortal. You'll feel like a right fool if it turns out to be true." Sorry." Looking slightly ashamed, the Magus, who was feared by the underworld as the lightning disaster, withered at the glare of the schoolmarm. "Well, maybe I'll go check up on him later. As soon as I can find a hole in my schedule, that is. If he's fine, he can mix me a tonic to deal with my fatigue. If not, well..." In the fifth chair, the head priest of the local church of the venerable Gnostics snored peacefully. Mud crept slowly through the branches high above the fern-dense forest floor. Using his favorite rockfall tactic had unfortunately been impossible in the previous day, due to the flat and open terrain. But that was not a problem in the forest. The massive and tightly packed conifers made it possible for the flexible golem to travel from branch to branch, moving like a mix between a snake, a monkey, and an octopus. Despite the strange method of locomotion, the intuition from the stealth skill allowed Mud to slip silently through the treetops. Climbing skill obtained at level 1. A welcome announcement appeared, and the bizarre movement was refined further. Experimenting with the new ways of gripping branches, Mud noticed movement in the nearby underbrush. Looking about restlessly, as it advanced from behind the tree was a large furry quadruped. Its body was thin and lean, appearing more designed for speed than strength. Its only natural weapons appeared to be hardened plates on the end of each of its limbs, and two branching bone-like growths from its head. Best match, red deer. Beast, red deer, a medium-sized mundane herbivore native to the plains and woodlands of the civilized continent, usually flees when threatened. Low-risk class, tier 0. It wasn't a predator or a magical beast, but the red deer was certainly more dangerous than a rat. If Jabrax was to be believed, this should give the larger volume of experience if killed. Additionally, it would help Mud determine its combat capabilities against a larger target. Taking its decision, Mud slowly and silently positioned itself above the skittish herbivore, entrusting itself to the gentle nudging of sneak attack skill. Mud waited in perfect moment to strike. Several tense moments passed until the red deer finally lowered its head to take a bite of the particularly juicy-looking patch of grass. "This is it!" Mud released its grip and the branch and plummeted towards the oblivious undulate. Unfortunately, this attack of Mud's inexperience showed. As it released its grip it had on its perch, it flexed the branch sprung upwards to its original height. The resilient rustling of the leaves alerted the deer, which quickly lifted its head and prepared to bolt. "Oh, no you don't!" Mud spread itself wide, pushing the amorphous form to the limit, creating a large gap in its body. It managed to spread even wider. The deer spotted the falling figure as it drew near and began to run, but he was too late, and couldn't escape the massive coverage of the net. After whipping around the neck and the torso with a firm grip, Mud pulled the rest of the body and coiled tightly around the deer. The deer bucked wildly and kicked in the air, but was unable to dislodge its unwanted passenger. Having secured a grip, Mud attempted to squeeze the deer as it had the rats, but found little success. The deer was much larger and sturdier, and the constriction had no immediate effect. Switching tactics, Mud formed a clump in densely packed dirt near the creature's back and attempted to bludgeon the deer's head. While he was unable to dislodge the golem, the red deer's efforts were not completely ineffective. The construct's focus was spread thin due to the complex shape and pressures that it was trying to maintain under such chaotic circumstances. As the red deer spasmed and kicked wildly, small parts of Mud's body flecked off into the surrounding undergrowth. It was not to the point that it caused damage, but Mud was starting to feel considerably uncomfortable with the slow loss of mass. Eventually, either due to its stamina running low or the bludgeoning taking effect, the deer began to slow. Unarmed combat skill has reached level 2. With a few final heavy blows, the deer finally stopped moving and, with 2 more strikes, passed away. Experience gained 10. Mud was ecstatic. This one kill had been worth 2 full days of ambushing rats, and it had only been hunting for a short time. If this was the difference in gain for a target the dictionary still considered low risk, what sort of returns could he expect from a medium or high-risk target? Eager to get back to hunting, Mud began diligently collecting a small amounts of its form that had been dislodged during the scuffle. As it reabsorbed a particularly large glob, Mud heard a rustling from the direction that it had left the corpse. End of chapter. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, please consider supporting the author from the link down below. Otherwise, if you wish to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so, like liking, subscribing, and possibly even becoming a patron. Otherwise, the easiest way would be to share. And until the next video, I hope that you all have a good one, and I'll see you then. Cheers.